Part 3. The Gathering Storm. The instant Vonatar and his friend passed through the massive portals of Karg, they were seized by a group of a dozen Giaks. They were pinned against the dank stone wall and subjected to a full-scale search. Vonatar's robes provided rich rewards. Had it not been for his half-strangled protests, the squirming Alia would have been nothing more than a Giak's snack. Vonatar shaped a dark thought, freezing the Giaks of the guard into immobility. The only other moving creature aside from himself was his friend. A fine welcome. Shall I kill these objects? Vonatar gestured around him at the silent mob. Tag, agreed the Giak, but Vonatar hesitated. The fidelity of his friend was fickle and not to be relied upon. Yet the magician recognized that in the next few hours he would have to deal with many Giaks and other creatures spawned in Helgadad, whose natural instincts would be to slaughter him. I am your master. You, master. The Giak pushed away one of the guards who had been pressing him against the wall. You, friend and master. Then follow me. Vonatar and the Giak made their way further down the dark and smoky corridor, deeper into the heart of Karg. He whispered a phrase, and the darkness of the corridor became as bright as day, but even so, after a few minutes of this rapid progress, he realized that he was utterly lost within Karg's labyrinthine passageways. The smell of burning sulfur, which he had first noticed shortly after entering the Darklands, was now so strong that it would have overpowered him had he not maintained his shield. His sandals began to smolder, little wisps of smoke rising from their blackened edges. At first, Vonatar thought it was only his imagination, but soon he was certain that the corridors were becoming broader and grander. There were patterned traceries of a gold-colored metal in the surface of the black floors, and stone statues of beings so hideous that Vonatar would not have had the words to describe them. It was only after they had passed the third of these that he realized that they were depictions of the Dark Lords. They rounded a corner, and ahead of them was a huge door of ebony. Vonatar sensed Dark Lord Zargana was waiting beyond it. He gestured impatiently, eager that the forthcoming confrontation be started as soon as possible, and the Giak rather apprehensively raised its spiked fist and knocked once, twice, a third time on the hard surface. The door boomed, and the echoes of the sound reverberated back behind them along the corridors. There was, for a moment, nothing but silence. Then the door erupted outwards towards them, and Vonatar was blinded by the intensity of the light which exploded into the corridor, his retinas destroyed by the white-hot glare. He threw his arms up to protect his face, but it was too late, far too late. Welcome, Vonatar. Expecting you. Banadon watched the money spider until it was lost in the grass. He looked across at Nina, who seemed startled. Suppose we should be on our way. She responded by cropping an extra mouthful of weeds, but let him climb onto her back with only a token wriggle of her rump by way of protest. The sun was ahead of them and to the left, low in the sky. Its brilliance made Banadon's eyes narrow as Nina trotted down the earthy lane. Overhead, bright birds darted from side to side. Ahead, the road curved, and he could see a clutch of cattle earnestly eyeing his approach over a dry stone dike. They came to a stream, and Banadon allowed Nina to drink. He, too, after a moment's reflection, cupped his hands and drank from the chill, fresh waters, making a point of drinking upstream from the horse. As they carried on along the road, he found himself amazed by the beauty of Sommerlund in these last days of winter. Miles behind him, the guild master of the Brotherhood of the Crystal Star stared into a saucer full of water and gaped at the vision he saw there. From a bleak sky descended untold thousands of bat-like creatures, each ridden by a hideous warrior bearing ferocious weapons. They clustered around an impressive and ancient building. Beyond that, the guildmaster could see no more. His magical abilities were considerable, but he had never fully mastered the art of scrying. The vision seemed meaningless to him. Perhaps Lauren would have known what it meant. For an instant, the guildmaster mourned the dead elder. Then he forced such thoughts from his mind and concentrated on the vision. The building seemed somehow familiar. It couldn't be. But it was. And he had sent his lowliest acolyte on an aging horse to warn the Kai. He knelt to pray, but of course it was far too late for prayer. Vonotar was blind. He could see nothing as his friend carried him into Zargana's court. In a detached way, he felt, even through his shield, that the otherworldly coldness of the corridors had given way to a parching heat. His blindness was not a total blackness. Instead, his brain seemed to be perceiving a mass of vivid colors, swirling like molten metal on a plane of glowing rock. The fragments of his mind that clutched to sanity asked him if, having once been blinded, he was now being blinded for a second time. The gurgling voice of Zargana filled his ears.
For a second time, Vonotar, I bid you welcome. You find the brilliance of my presence more than your mortal faculties can bear. So be it. For a while, you can live with your loss of sight. Perhaps, if you please me, I shall return your vision.
Vonotar bit his tongue deliberately. The pain was fiery, now that the potion was wearing off, and he almost screamed. Yes, Zargana, I'm glad of your welcome, but I wish it were a better one. He could feel on his skin the Dark Lord's sudden fury, and its equally sudden abatement.
Do you say that I insult you?
Yes. I've come here to help you, and you reward me with this. Vonotar waved his hands sweepingly, hoping that the gesture was in the right direction.
Better you stay blind for a while than you see me.
Zargana's voice bubbled.
Men have been driven to insanity by the very sight of me. You are a man, and I suspect not a very strong one. Would you defy the testimony of your senses and look upon my face?
Vonotar's mind conjured up a thought in a right-hand shape, and his sight was restored. However, he saw things the way that he wished to see them, rather than the way that they actually were. He saw Zargana's court as a quiet living room full of tapestries and oak and maple paneling, with his host sitting on the far side of a low table and pouring out a cup of jala. Zargana was, it seemed, a genial old man with a grey beard and approaching baldness. Through the arched windows of the room, Vonotar could see a blue sky streaked with apprehensive clouds. Outside one of the windows, yellow nasturtiums bobbed gently in an afternoon breeze. I can see you now. The old man added milk to the jala and passed the cup to Vonotar. Perhaps a spoonful of honey, he asked. The magician shook his head. The clock on the mantelpiece chimed once to indicate the quarter hour. I can see you now. The old man chuckled sadly. No, Vonotar, you cannot see me, but you can see enough of me, I suppose. I can see you well enough to speak with you, and speak with you I must. I know you must. For decades and centuries, the Somlending have hated you and your kind. The Brotherhood of the Crystal Star and the Kai Lords are sworn to your destruction, yet they know there is no meaning in their oaths. Their aim is the same as yours, to dominate all of Magnamund. True, said the old man. He bit delicately on a buttered scone. There seems no reason why you should not unite with the Kai and the Guild. There is no force in this world which could resist you if you were acting together. The old man nodded placidly and leaned forward to help himself to a cake. His clothes were shabby and in places so thin that his grey skin could be seen through them. I come to you both to assist you and to ask for your assistance. All right. So we should act together. Conquering Magnamund is rather a tall order for the two of us, but I should imagine we could manage if we set our minds on it. There's a very big question, though. Why should I help you if the way is open to me to conquer the world by myself? Vonotar crossed his legs and smiled. Because I can tell you how to capture Sommerlund not this year, not next, but tomorrow. How? If I tell you, will you give me back my sight, my true sight? A piffling matter. He snapped his fingers to indicate how trifling the whole affair would be. And will you allow your Nadziranim's magic to initiate me into the deepest of their secrets? Only if I have full control of those powers will I be able to reign alongside you. He thought harder about this. I see no reason why not, he said after a while. Even if you plotted treason against me, the abilities of the black arts are not so great as to present any threat. He moved around the table and settled himself in his chair. Another cup of jala? No, thank you. A scone? These are extremely good. No, what I want is your guarantee of our allegiance and your promise that I shall learn the fullest secrets of Nadziranim magic. Do you trust my promise? Not entirely, no. But if I am possessed of the Nadziranim abilities, I'll be able to protect myself against any force which you could direct against me. The old man turned his head sideways, looking at the clock on the mantelpiece. Its hands had started to whirl with lightning speed, so that they were visible only as a grey haze over the foxed white face. You interest me, magician. I could kill you at any moment more easily than you could kill a gnat. Yet here you are, not just having the presumption to speak to me, but also trying to drive a hard bargain. Let us put each other on probation, as it were. I will instruct my Nadziranim to give you their magic, but bear in mind that should you attempt to turn it against me, their concerted powers will be easily sufficient to destroy you. In return, I demand that you give me the secret of how I can take Sommerlund into my thrall. First, give me my sight back. No, Zargana replied. He laughed out loud, then waving a hand in apology for his discourtesy. If I restored your vision to you now, you would lose your eyes forever and possibly your mind. Let me first call upon my Nadziranim to instill their mysteries in your mind. He rang a little silver bell, and after a few moments a servant shyly pushed open the door. She had the plumpness and the creasedness of an overripe apple, and there was an amicable smile on her pink-cheeked face. She was dressed in a uniform of grey and white. Sire, she said. The old man didn't reply to her, but instead turned his gaze on Vonotar. This woman, he said, is, my Nadziranim. If you wish their secrets, you must embrace her. You must persuade yourself to love her as if she were your own mother. It is only a small thing to ask, and the rewards for you will assuredly be great. Vonotar looked at the servant. He felt love for her growing within him. Embrace each other, ordered the old man. The clock chimed twice, indicating the half-hour, although its hands were still whizzing round almost invisibly. Vonotar got shakily to his feet and moved uncertainly towards the elderly servant. His legs felt as if they had only just enough power to walk the few yards necessary to reach her. She smiled encouragingly at him. Her body was as old as the winter of the world, but in her eyes there was the brightness of summer. Her wrinkled throat belied the ampleness of her form. Her arms were liver-marked, but her wrists were oddly slender, almost like those of a young girl. Embrace her, said the old man, pouring himself yet another cup of jala. Obediently, his limbs moving jerkily like those of a marionette, Vonotar put his hands on her shoulders and pulled her towards him. She responded by sinking her suddenly sharp teeth into his jugular vein. Night was falling when Bannerton and Nina reached the outskirts of a village. It was a fairly miserable, scraggly place, a few barns, a single street of houses, some starved and wicked-looking dogs. A beggar sat in a doorway, but was so despondent that he didn't even look up as Nina clopped by him. Bannerton looked around him, but there seemed to be no inn. Perhaps he'd be better off carrying on through this place and finding a field to sleep in. At the far end of the street was a smithy, and from within it came the only sounds of life he had heard in this place. There was the steady, repeated clang of a heavy mallet on molten metal. As Bannerton drew level with the smithy's door, he could not just feel the heat, he could almost hear it. He let himself down from Nina's back and stumbled across to the doorway of the house immediately adjoining the smithy. Bannerton raised the heavy knocker and let it drop. He was just about to turn away and go into the open entrance of the smithy itself when the door opened. Framed against the darkness was a short, bulging woman, wiping her hands briskly on her checkered apron. She smelt of soft soaps and crisp towels, of purifying salts and of brittle starch. She smiled at him. "May I help you, young man?" "I'm a journeyman for the Brotherhood of the Crystal Star." Bannerton touched his robe as if to confirm his statement. "I'm looking for somewhere to stay for the night, and this village doesn't seem to have an inn. Do any of the houses here take in lodgers? I have some money, and I'll—" "Don't talk of money. My husband and I have reason enough to be grateful to the members of your guild. Only 5 years ago, Tim broke his arm when a horse he was shoeing kicked him, and he would have lost it if it hadn't been for the fact that—" Bannerton allowed the words to lap over him. He was too tired to take in much of what she was saying. Wandering magicians frequently helped out the people in the remoter parts of the country in return for food or a night's lodging. "So you come right on in, young sir, and I'll call my husband. He'll be glad to meet you, I'm sure. Stay here for the night and share our supper with us. The children will be glad for your company, too. They're not our children, mind you. Ishir and Kai never saw fit to grant us children. No, Darren and Thelda are our nephew and niece. Bannerton tethered Nina to a ring set into the stone wall, and the woman led him down a short, dark passageway to a well-lit kitchen. Two children bounced up from where they had been playing by the fire to have a look at the newcomer. "I'm Thelda," said the taller of them, a solemn-faced girl with an incongruous mop of raggedy blonde hair. Bannerton guessed she was about 12. "Hello there," said the younger child. "I'm called Darren." He too had fair hair, but in contrast to his sister, he was heavily built, his bones covered in puppy fat. Bannerton guessed that he was about 6 or 7.